Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa. I hope I find you all well. Thank you for once again bearing with me. I'm trying to find some kind of happy medium with this channel between life and this channel. So please bear with me while I do that teething process. I have put in the community page the other day that I'm going to release a video on Tuesdays and Fridays, Lord being willing, so you guys know when to expect a video. I need to actually put this information in another video because some people might not actually see it. And also my husband had an operation, so I've been having to take care of him. And obviously it's been the summer holidays. We are about to go back into homeschooling tomorrow. So yes, it's been pretty full on, and I've had a few, I've been in a lot of pain myself. So it's just been trying to find the energy between everything to get on and do this. So here I am. I always feel like I need to give you an explanation. But yeah. So we are going to do Beyond Death's Door. We are going on now on chapter 7, and this is Descending to Hell. This is quite a big chapter, so it might not be like 20 minutes. We'll just see how we get on. But you can always pause it, come back, or, you know, do whatever you guys wish. So let's get stuck into it, and enough of me chatting. So, Descending to Hell. At last, we turn to those reports that thus far have received little publicity. These are those who, after returning from clinical death, describe themselves as having been in hell. Some of these include the few who apparently broke through the barrier or great divide separating the sorting grounds from what could be the place of judgment. Those who did not encounter the barrier seemed to leave a scene of death to enter a different type of sorting ground. One that was morose and dark, similar to a carnival's spook house. In most cases, this place seems to be underground or within the earth in some way. Hell. Thomas Welsh, in his booklet, Oregon's Amazing Miracle, describes the most unusual experience in which he saw a tremendous lake of fire. The most awesome sight one could ever see was this side of the final judgment. While working as an engineer's helper for the Bridal Veil Lumber Company, 30 miles east of Portland, Oregon, Welsh was required to walk across a trestle over a dam 55 feet above the water where the sawmill was located. He then gives this account. I went out onto the trestle to straighten out some timbers which were crossed and not moving on the conveyor. Suddenly, I fell off the trestle, tumbled down between the timbers and into the pond, which was 10 feet deep. An engineer sitting in the cab of his locomotive unloading logs into the pond saw me fall. I landed on my head on the first beam 30 feet down, then tumbled from one beam to another until I fell into the water and disappeared from his view. There were 70 men working in and around the mill at the time. The mill was shut down, and then every available man was called to search for my body, according to the testimonies of these men. The search went on for 45 minutes to 1 hour before I was finally found by M.J.H. Gunderson, who has written his own account of this to verify the facts of this testimony. I was dead as far as the world is concerned, but I was alive in another world. There was no lost time. I learned more in the hour of the out-of-body than I can ever learn while in this body. All I could remember was falling over the edge of a trestle. The locomotive engineer watched me go all the way down into the water. The next thing I knew, I was standing near a shoreline of a great ocean of fire. It happened to be what the Bible says is in Revelation 21:8, the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone. This is the most awesome sight one could ever see this side of the final judgment. I remember more clearly than any other thing that would ever happen to me in my lifetime, every detail of every moment. When I saw what I saw and what happened during that hour, I was gone from this world. I was standing some distance from this burning, turbulent, rolling mass of blue fire. As far as my eyes could see, it was just the same. A lake of fire and brimstone. There was nobody in it. I was not in it. I saw other people whom I had known that had died when I was 13. Another was a boy I'd gone to school with who died from cancer of the jaw that had started with an infected tooth while I was a young lad. He was 2 years older than I. We recognised each other, even though we did not speak. They too were looking and seemed to be perplexed and in deep thought. as though they could not believe what they saw. Their expressions were those of bewilderment and confusion. The scene was so awesome that words simply fail. There is no way to describe it except to say, we were eyewitnesses now to the final judgment. There's no way to escape, no way out. You don't even try to look for one. This is the prison out of which no one can escape except by divine intervention. I said to myself in an audible voice, if I had known about this, I would have done anything that was required of me to escape coming to a place like this. But I had not known. As these words were racing through my mind, I saw another man coming by in front of us. I knew immediately who he was. He had a strong, kind, compassionate face, composed and unafraid, master of all. He saw. It was Jesus himself. A great hope took hold of me, and I knew the answer to my problem was this great and wonderful person who was moving by me in this prison of lost, confused, judgment-bound souls. I did not do anything to attract his attention. I said again to myself, if he would only look my way and see me, he could rescue me from this place because he would know what to do. He passed on by, and it seemed as though he would not look my way. But just before he passed out of sight, he turned his head and looked directly at me. That is all it took. His look was enough. In seconds, I was back entering into my body again. It was like coming in through the door of a house. I could hear the Brokes, the people I was staying with, praying minutes before. I could open my eyes or say anything. I could hear and I understood what was going on. Then suddenly life came into my body and I opened my eyes and spoke to them. It's easy to talk about and describe something you have seen. I know there is a lake of fire because I've seen it. I know Jesus is alive in eternity. I have seen him. The Bible states in Revelation 1:9 through 11, I, John, was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice of a trumpet saying, I am the Alpha Omega, the first, the last. And what thou seest, write it in a book. Among the many things John saw was the judgment, and he describes it in Revelation 20 as he saw it. In verse 10 he says, and the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire. Again, in Revelation 21:8, John says he saw the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone. This is the lake I saw, and I'm certain of this one thing, that in the end of this age of the final judgment, every corrupt thing in this universe will ultimately be cast into the lake and be forever destroyed. I thank God for people who can pray. It was Mrs. Broke I had heard praying for me. She said, oh God, don't take Tom, he's not saved. Presently I opened my eyes and said to them, what happened? I had not lost any time. I'd been gone somewhere and now I was back. Soon after this, an ambulance arrived and I was taken to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Portland. I arrived there just before 6 o'clock in the evening. I was taken into surgery and my scalp was sewn with many stitches. I was put in the intensive care ward. There was really not much the doctors could do. It was simply a matter of wait and see. During these 4 days and nights, I seemed to be in constant communication with the Holy Spirit. I relived the events of my past life and the things I'd seen, such as Lake of Fire, Jesus coming to me there, seeing my uncle and the boy I'd been in school with, and the coming back to life again. The presence of God's Spirit was with me continually, and many times I spoke out loud to the Lord. Then I began to ask God what he wanted in my life, what his will was for me. Then sometime around 9 o'clock, the call of God came. The voice of the Spirit can be very real, he said to me. I want to tell you the world what you saw and how you came back to life. Another instance involves a patient dying with a heart attack. She attended church every Sunday and considered herself an average Christian. I remember getting short of breath and then I must have blacked out. Then I saw that I was getting out of my body. The next thing I remember was entering this gloomy room where I saw in one of the windows this huge giant with a grotesque face that was watching me. Running around the windowsill were little imps or elves that seemed to be with the giant. The giant beckoned me to come with him. I didn't want to go, but I had to. Outside was darkness, but I could hear people moaning all around me. I could feel things moving about my feet. As we moved on through this tunnel or cave, things were getting worse. I remember I was crying. Then, for some reason, the giant turned me loose and sent me back. I felt I was being spared. I don't know why. Then I remember finding myself back in the hospital bed. The doctor asked me if I'd been taking drugs. My description must have sounded like the DTs. I told him I didn't have either of these habits and that the story was true. It has changed my whole life. The variations in the figure that takes them away or sends them back from the spirit world seems to vary considerably among the bad experiences. whereas in the good ones, this figure seems to be similar from case to case. I had severe abdominal pains from an anti-inflammatory condition in the pancreas. They were giving me medicine for my blood pressure, which was falling, and my consciousness was slipping. I remember them working on me. I was going through this long tunnel, and I was wondering why my feet weren't touching the sides. I seemed to be floating and going very fast. It seemed to be underground. It may have been a cave, but the awfulest, eerie sounds were going on. There was an odour of decay like a cancer patient would have. Everything now seemed to be in slow motion. I can't recall of all the things I saw, but some of the workers were only half human, mocking and talking to each other in a language I didn't understand. Excuse me. When you asked me if I saw anybody I knew or if I met a beam of light, I did not. But there was a large person in radiant white clothes that appeared when I called, "Jesus, save me." He looked at me and I felt the message live differently. I don't remember leaving there or how I got back. There are a lot of other things that may have happened that I don't remember. Maybe I'm afraid to remember. In a modern Charles Dickens account of travel to different worlds, George Ritchie, MD, describes his death from a lobar type of pneumonia in 1943 while at Camp Barkley, Texas. At the age of 20, in his excellent book, Return from Tomorrow, he describes how he unaccountably returned to life in 9 minutes, but during that time experienced a lifetime of adventure. Some of it good and some of it bad. He describes a journey with a glorious being of flooding light and power whom he identified as Christ, and who took him through a series of worlds. The world of the damned in this instance existed on a vast plain that seemed to be on the surface of the earth, where depraved spirits were at constant warfare with one another. Locked in permanent combat, they punched, gouged at one another. Sexual abuses and howls of frustration were everywhere, and loathsome thoughts of anyone were universal knowledge of all. They could not see Dr. Ritchie or the figure of Christ with him, and the figure showed nothing but compassion and unhappiness that these people had sealed their doom. Reverend Kenneth E. Hagan recounts experiences that changed his whole life in his pamphlet, My Testimony. The experience caused him to enter the ministry to tell others, and he relates the following. On the 20th day of April 1933, Saturday night, 7:30 o'clock at McKinney, Texas, 32 miles north of Dallas, my heart stopped beating and the spiritual man that lives in my body departed from my body. I went down, down, down until the light of the earth faded away. The further down I went, the blacker it became, until it was all blackness. I could not have seen my hand if it had been in 1 inch in front of my eyes. The further down I went, the more stifling it was and the hotter it was. Finally, way down below me, I could see the lights flickering on the walls of the caverns of the damned. They were caused by the fires of hell. The giant orb of flame, white-crested, pulled me, drew me like a magnet draws metal into itself. I did not want to go. I did not walk, but just as metal jumps to the magnet, my spirit was drawn to that place. I could not take my eyes off it. The heat beat me in the face. Many years have now gone by, and yet I can see it with many eyes, just as I saw it then. It's just as fresh in my memory as though it happened last night. Upon reaching the bottom of the pit, I had become conscious of some kind of spirit being by my side. I hadn't looked at him because I could not take my gaze off the fires of hell. But when I paused, that creature laid his hand on my arm, halfway between my shoulder and my elbow, to escort me in. At the same moment, a voice spoke. Away above blackness, above the earth, above the heavens, it was the voice of God. Though I did not see him, I do not know what he said because he did not speak in English. He spoke some other tongue, and when he spoke, it reverberated throughout the region of the damned, shaking it like the leaf in the wind, causing that creature to lose his grip. I did not turn around, but there was a power that pulled me, and I came back away from the fire, away from that heat, back in the shadows of the darkness. I began to ascend until I came to the top of the pit and saw the light of the earth. I came back into that room just as real as any other time. I entered in through the door, except my spirit needed no doors. I slipped right back down into my body as a man slips into his trousers in the morning. The same way in which I went out, through my mouth, I began to talk to my grandmother. She said, "Son, I thought you were dead. I thought you were gone." I would that I had words to describe that place. People go through this life so self-complacent and as though they will not have to face hell. But God's word and my own personal experiences tell me differently. I know what it is to be unconscious, and It is black when you are unconscious, but I tell you that there is no blackness like the outer darkness. Many other hell experiences are accumulating rapidly, but will not be mentioned here. One that I should mention, however, involves a regular church member who was surprised in death to find himself descending through a tunnel lined by fire in its lower half, opening into a huge fiery world of honour. He saw some of his old friends from the good old days, who exhibited blank stares of apathy, who were burdened with useless loads, and who were continually going nowhere but never stopping for fear of the main drivers, who, he said, were beyond description. Complete darkness outskirted the milieu of pointless activity. He escaped permanent captivity when he was summoned by God to come out in some miraculous way that is not clear. He has since been following a compulsive urge to warn others of the dangers of complacency and the need to take a definite stand in their faith. Suicide. Suicide is attempted by many people to end it all. According to the cases I've seen or heard about through other doctors, it may only be the beginning of it all. I don't know of any good out-of-the-body experiences that have resulted from suicide. However, only a few have attempted suicide have had experiences they will talk about. Here is the account described by one of my colleagues. Descending to hell. A 14-year-old girl became despondent over a report card from school. Communication with her parents usually centered upon her deficits and recently upon her inadequacy to measure up to the grades of her sister, who was a couple of years older and seemed to be accomplished in nearly everything. Even looks were compared. She never seemed to receive any praise, and now she had to confront her parents with her report card. She went up to her room and, thinking of the best way to solve the problem, she took a bottle of aspirin from the bathroom. It probably had 80 tablets in it, and she had to take a lot of water to get them down. Her parents found her a couple of hours later in a coma. She had vomited over her own face and into the pillow. Fortunately, many of the aspirin had apparently not been absorbed, and she recovered a couple of hours later in hospital emergency room, after we used a stomach pump and bicarbonate of soda to neutralise acidosis, which caused a peculiar heavy breathing, a characteristic of aspirin coma. She was fortunate it was aspirin she took and not Tylenol, because the latter causes less vomiting and results in delayed damage to the liver that is frequently fatal. During one of the vomiting episodes, she inhaled some of the vomitus, developed spasm of the vocal cords, stopped breathing, and then had a cardiac arrest. She recovered immediately with external heart massage and placement of a breathing tube down her throat into her windpipe. Her recollections during the recovery were poor, but at the time she kept saying, "Mama, help me. Make them let go of me. They're trying to hurt me." The doctors tried to apologise for hurting her, but she said it wasn't the doctors, but them, those demons in hell. They wouldn't let go of me. They wanted me. I couldn't get back. It was just awful. She slept for another day, and her mother hugged her most of that time. After the various tubes were removed, she asked her to recall what had happened. She remembered taking the aspirin, but absolutely nothing else. Somewhere in her mind, the events may still be suppressed. Perhaps they could be reached with penthol interview hypnosis. Frankly, I'm reticent to approach this area. It reminds me of demonology, a subject I respect but leave to others. She subsequently became a missionary several years later. No despondency, I am told, but everywhere she goes, she brings exuberance and a contagious feeling. The prevalence of depression, the prelude to suicide, is appalling. Suicide is the 11th most common cause of death in the United States, accounting for approximately 25,000 deaths annually, or a little less than 1.5% of all deaths. In teenagers, next to automobile accidents, it's the most common cause of death. For each case resulting in death, it's probable that several more have attempted suicide unsuccessfully. This prevalence of suicidal thoughts like bad experience after death tend not to be reported, much less discussed. They seem to be considered skeletons in one's life, something to hide and socially degrading, and yet therapy for this hurt was warped emotional life centers around release and discussion. Because of emotional illness, our pharmaceutical market for tranquilizer drugs and antidepressants has skyrocketed. Most people I see seem to be on something. Valium is now the best moneymaker and most popular drug next to aspirin products. The following case involved a 54-year-old housewife with recurrent despondency. I'll just intercede there before I start that next bit. I've spoke on this channel before that I tried to take my life when I was 15 years of age. There was just so much going on. I wasn't happy growing up in the home I was in, and I met a boyfriend who I then went on to marry and have 3 children with. And, you know, my parents, because, well, his parents basically didn't want us together. He was Muslim. But I was happy, you know, I finally found some sort of comfort because I was so unhappy. And so I tried to kill myself, and I took 50 paracetamol, which is a painkiller. And I took a few other pills that I could find lying around the house, one of them being a tablet for epilepsy. And I took a few of those, just like whatever I could find. But the thing is, leading up to that, I had this voice that just would not stop telling me, like, peace is going to come, things are never going to get better. You might as well do this and then you will find peace. And it'll all be over. And even when I'm taking 50 tablets one by one, my mind still didn't alter to think, what are you doing? It's like I was in a trance. So I truly believe, obviously, there is those demons that are constantly talking to you and luring you into this. So if anyone is feeling like that, then I fully understand what you're going through. Send a message. I will put my email down if you need to talk, but it's never the answer. And then if you're not saved, it's definitely not the answer. I wasn't saved then. And if the Lord wasn't merciful to me to save me from, I had no long-term liver damage or anything. I had to drink charcoal and I violently threw up. It was just awful. Absolutely awful. But I didn't have any liver damage or anything like that. However, I was pregnant at the time and I didn't know. So I lost that baby. So I did pay the price for what I did. But I didn't pay the ultimate price, and that was end up in hell. I've gone on to have such a blessed life. The Lord has blessed me with. And I'm saved and I've got peace. So don't think that suicide's the end. It really is not. What you are going to miss so many blessings if you think that that's what's going to bring you peace. There's always a sign to yourself when these thoughts go in your head. Just think something really beautiful must be on the horizon that Satan doesn't want me to have. Do not give him the satisfaction. Seek the Lord. So I just wanted to put that out there. So the following case involved a 54-year-old housewife with recurrent despondency. Nobody loved me. My husband and children used me as a servant. I was always cleaning up after them, but they acted as if I didn't even exist. One night I was crying and nobody listened. I took some Valium and told them I didn't want to live anymore. They still didn't listen. So I took a whole bottle of them, 50 of them. And then it was too late. I knew I had really done it. I was going to die. It was a sin, but so was living. As I got drowsy, I remember going down the black hole round and round. Then I saw a glowing red hot spot getting bigger and bigger until I was able to stand up. It was all red and hot and on fire. The earth was like slimy mud that sank over my feet, and it was hard to move. The heat was awful. It made it hard to breathe. I cried, "Oh Lord, give me another chance." I prayed and prayed. How I got back, I'll never know. They said I was unconscious for 2 days and that they pumped my stomach. They said my experience in hell must have been a drug trip, but they don't really know. I've taken Valium many times before, but never had an experience with it. Another despondent lady, the mother of a 24-year-old daughter who had committed suicide over a negligent boyfriend, in turn tried to take her own life with an overdose of Amatol, a barbiturate. As soon as the daughter's funeral was over, she hoped to join her daughter. Instead of seeing her daughter, she found herself in what appeared to be hell, being jostled up and down on a blanket held between 2 satanic beings. The scene occurred in a huge foreboding cave. The beings had tails and slanted eyes, and she says looked horrible. After resuscitation and stomach washing, she recovered and was told that her experiences were probably due to drugs. She is still convinced it was not. She has received a new purpose and insight by the experience and is now organising clubs for the emotional support of family survivors of suicide victims. What are the practical consequences of suicide? Does suicide accomplish what the one attempting it intended? Is suicide indeed painless? Recently, a prominent retired, closely devoted, childless couple looked to suicide as a cure-all. The woman had become confined to a hospital by a chronic lung disease which had resulted in extreme oxygen dependency and mental derangement. When her husband was told of the permanency of her problems, he decided to take her home for a few days to see if her despondency and confusion might improve with familiar surroundings. He says he wanted to take care of her at home. He did. Apparently, unwilling to see his wife suffer with continual despairing discomfort, he shot her several times through the head. After calling a friend to tell him the circumstances, he then shot himself through the head. Unfortunately, he died. She lived. The point is, his attempt to improve a bad situation failed because his solution was wrong. After this incident, I realised I'd been treating the wrong patient. I had missed the diagnosis of despondency and hopeless frustration in the husband. Instead, I'd been paying my full attention to the patient who was occupying the bed. God's help wasn't even asked, much less considered. In reflection, I noticed this has always been one of my problems. In emergencies, I ask for help automatically. In the more prolonged moments of despondency, I look for my own solutions. Descend into hell, light that is darkness. Perhaps we should mention again the controversy over the significance of the beam of light that's been encountered by many who have had after-death experiences. The light appeared in the good experiences and seemed to represent acceptance for all people. There was a sense of universal forgiveness, according to some, a general feeling of happiness and ecstasy, of indescribable peace and bliss. In Life After Life, Dr. Moody mentioned that he could not find a single reference to a heaven or a hell. There seemed to be no judgment when any sinful deeds of the individual were made manifest. There was no response of anger from the being of light, but only understanding. Stephen Board takes note with this observation in his article, Light at the End of the Tunnel. He expresses his belief that the benevolent beam of light described by Moody reveals an air of moral tolerance and philosophy. I'm okay, you're okay. To demonstrate that all cases do not involve an angel of light, Board reports an encounter with an angel of death, as recorded by Dr. Philip Swihart, clinical psychologist and director of Midwestern Colorado Mental Health Center in Montrose, Colorado. I hope I've said that right. It was Friday night, early in January 1967, when I was attacked, beaten, and kicked nearly to death. At the hospital, the doctor decided to observe me the rest of the night and do exploratory surgery in the abdominal area in the morning. While in the operating room awaiting surgery, I felt the presence of something or some power that I thought, this is it. Next, blackness. Time became of no importance. I had no idea how long I was without any sensation in that darkness. Then it was light. I awoke and knew it was real. In front of me, I watched my whole life pass by. Every thought, word, and every movement I had made in my life, since the time I knew that Jesus was real. I was very young when I took Christ as my saviour. I saw things I had done which I had forgotten, but remembered as I watched them pass before me. This experience was, to say the least, unbelievable. Every detail, right up to the present time, it all took place in what seemed just a fraction of a second, and yet was all very vivid. All the time I was watching my life go by, I felt the presence of some sort of power, but I didn't see it. Next, I was drawn into total darkness. Then I stopped. It felt like a big hollow room. It seemed to be a very large space and totally dark. I could see nothing, but felt the presence of this power. I asked the power who I and who he was. Communication was not by talking, but through a flow of energy. He answered that he was the angel of death. I believed him. The angel went on to say that my life was not as it should be, that he could take me on, but I would be given a second chance, and that I was to go back. He promised me I would not die in 1967. The next thing I remember was in the recovery room, back in my body. I was so taken in by this experience that I did not notice what kind of body I had, nor how much time had elapsed. It was so real, I believed it. Later in 1967, a car ran over my neck and shoulders. Still later in that year, I was in a car wreck in which both cars were totaled, and in both accidents I came out almost completely unhurt. In neither accident was I at fault. I did not tell many people about my experience. I did not want to be considered crazy, but the encounter was very real to me, and I still believe I was with the angel of death. Many theologians also take issue with the concept of universal forgiveness that is offered by the angel of light, purportedly encountered by many patients having good experiences, whether their lives have been resplendent or not, whether they are believers or not, seldom appearing in bad light. Satan is capable of appearing as an angel himself. See 2 Corinthians 11, 14 and 15. Billy Graham reminds us there is a life after death for all people. However, those that have never accepted Christ as Lord and Saviour will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Matthew 25:46. Since all will not be saved, some theologians remind us that Satan does not always appear evil, but is a master of disguise, capable of the most clever deception. He can transform himself into an angel of light to convince the unsaved they are already saved, or to neutralize the necessity of the Christian gospel. Multiple experiences. A few of the patients I have interviewed report multiple experiences from multiple deaths. At first, these experiences may be bad and then good. So far, never in the reverse order. Some of them are similar to the first case I described, the man who said he was in hell and who then called for divine deliverance and who subsequently had pleasant experiences. I recall a similar case, one I found difficult to explain. This involved a staunch Christian, the founder of a Sunday school and a lifelong supporter of the church. He experienced 3 different episodes of heart attack, 3 different episodes of fibrillation, 3 different episodes of successful resuscitation, and 3 different after-death experiences. The first episode was terrifying and the next 2 were quite pleasing and even euphoric. I'm sorry guys if you hear banging and stuff, my kids are upstairs. I have told them I'm filming, but they're kids. I don't remember the circumstances prior to the first time I passed out. They told me I had died, and when I woke up I found 2 red areas the size of small saucers, one over my left chest and one over my upper breastbone area. They said this was where the shot paddles were applied. I don't remember that either. I do remember you asking me as soon as I woke up what happened. The only thing I remember was passing out in blackness, and then I saw these red snakes crawling all over me. I couldn't get away from them. I would throw one of them off and then another one would get on me. It was horrible. Finally, I was dragged down to the ground by something and then other crawling things started getting on me. Some looked like red jelly. I screamed and cried out, but no one paid any attention to me. I had the impression there were many other people in the same fix all around me. It sounded like human voices and some of them were screaming. It was reddish black in there and hazy and hard to see, but I never did see any flames. There wasn't any devil, just these crawling things. Although my chest hurt real bad, I remember how glad I was to wake up and get out of that place. I was sure glad to see my family, and I never want to go back there. I'm convinced it was the entrance to hell. Without any apparent reason, unless some secret transformation or dedication occurred of which I am unaware, this patient's subsequent 2 experiences during their deaths were beautiful. He tried to describe one of them as follows. I remember the nurse had come into the room to start oxygen through a tube in my nose because of the severe chest pains that were reoccurring. She said she was going to leave me for a minute to get a shot for my pain. I remember as she was saying that I must have fainted because she yelled out the door to the other nurse who was on duty at the diagnostic centre that night. Come in here quick, Mr. Ledford has had heart arrest. That's all I remember. Everything was black, and then I remember seeing them working on me, and it seemed so strange because I felt perfectly fine. Had to move to one side to see my face to make sure it was my body. Just then, about 3 or 4 more people came in. One of them was a boy in charge of oxygen, and the others seemed to be nurses from another unit. Then everything seemed to be dimming out and going black again. I was moving through this long corridor, and after a while I noticed a small pinpoint light that looked like a bird. And then they slowly became larger and larger until it looked like a white dove and was flying, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and brighter, expanding until the whole area was lit with this brilliant, beautiful light. I have never seen anything like it before. I found myself on a rolling green meadow that was slightly uphill. I saw my brother, and he was alive, and yet I remember when he had died. He was so glad to see me. We put our arms around each other right there in the middle of the meadow. I had tears in my eyes, and then we strolled arm in arm up the meadow. I remember that it was uphill a bit, and then we came to a white fence that looked like a split rail, but I couldn't get over it. Some force seemed to keep me from getting over that fence. I didn't see anybody on the other side, and there didn't seem to be any reason that I couldn't get over the fence. The next thing I remember was feeling this thud on my chest. Somebody was pounding on me and pushing on me. I thought my ribs were breaking and woke up looking up into your face. I remember I didn't want to come back. It was beautiful beyond expression, what I had seen. This was his second experience. He was so able to recall vivid details of the wonderful existence, but he couldn't recall details of the painfully unpleasant first experience. Nor could he volunteer an explanation for its occurrence to a professing Christian. His third experience was also pleasant and easily recalled. I was floating over this beautiful city, looking down. It was the prettiest city I'd ever seen. People were there, all in white. The whole sky was so lit up, brighter than sunshine. I was about to drift down and walk around in the city when I found myself back in my body, feeling the most terrible shock again as they put the paddles to me to revive my heart. Except for my wife's sake, I wish you hadn't brought me back. This patient finally got his wish. He died a fourth time a few months later from cancer of the large bowel. This condition was entirely unrelated to the repeated heart attacks, which I'd been certain would be the ultimate cause of his death. I've often wondered what he's doing now. And that is the end of that chapter. The next chapter is dealing with the dying. And then what's that all about, and making sure. So we've got about 3 more chapters left on this book. Sorry guys, I've got really irritated eyes. This eye keeps twitching. I don't know what's going on. So if you see me, my eye twitching, then it's just on this side. Years ago I had Bell's palsy, and God forbid that ever comes back. So that is the next chapter of that book. I hope you enjoy it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. Look out for another video on Friday, when, Lord being willing, I will have another one to upload there. I might spend one day recording loads and then I can just upload them as the week goes on. I haven't decided how I'm going to work it out, but Tuesdays and Fridays are the days that I'm hoping to have videos up. Hopefully if I can get another video in between, either reading or just a general chit chat about stuff and things like that. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you all in the next video. Please take care of yourselves and stay safe. Bye, guys.